It's recording?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This packed house for coming to my lunch and learn. Who's that who just joined? Nobody. Anyway. Okay.
So, it's Darren. I'm having problems here.
It's all right. Just start, and then you can do it. All right. So today we're talking about structured data and schema.org and how it relates to search engine optimization for any front-end developers out there. So we're going to talk about what HTML vocabularies are, like what are they, what are custom vocabularies, talk about structured data, and we're going to focus on microformats, RDFA, microdata, which are three main forms of it. We're going to talk about schema.org and how to use it with microdata. I'm going to explain why we want to do this and then just show some tools and resources. So to start, we're going to talk about what HTML vocabularies are. If you think of a vocabulary that has words, all of the different sort of DOM elements in HTML are part of the vocabulary. So like span, div, section, anchor, all those things are the elements of the HTML vocabulary. The problem with it is these are very broad. They don't explain what the content inside of them is. So for instance, if you have a div class, then you have a bunch of text that talks about jaguar, cat. A person's going to know what that is because they are, they're reading it and they understand. And they can see the context, but a search engine is going to go in there and it's going to see just a bunch of text and the word jaguar. And it might not necessarily know if you're talking about a car or a cat or something else. So to help with that, what's needed is new vocabularies that can be that can extend HTML to be more descriptive of the content that's inside them. And these are what custom vocabularies are. So anybody can create a custom vocabulary. The main point of it is you have to have some sort of globally unique identifier, a custom URL for that vocabulary. In this case, these are three examples. So here's an example of what custom vocabularies can do. So here's a list of different ones. And for instance, this one here is a vocabulary for describing relationships between people. So if you have a website, maybe like a big data website that's talking about relationships, you can extend HTML so you can point out, say somebody is an acquaintance of somebody else, or do with relationships.
Like Facebook?
Yeah.
Or LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. And another one that's pretty important is good relations. And that is sort of like the preeminent e-commerce vocabulary. So they have things, and this one's been around for a long time, but what they have are things where you can describe products, you can describe different parts of the product, like the price, the quantity of it, the reviews, things like that, to make information about products more apparent to search engines. So the question is, all right, we have all these vocabularies, but how do you use them?
Do they have to register these vocabularies with the search engines? Like, how do they know?
There's more involved to it than just having that URL. But I was trying to figure out what exactly is involved because it has to have, it's called something item type thing. So it has to have like an item, which is the word, and then it has to have a relationship with like a description of it. And I know there's a way to format it on the website so that search engines understand it. But it's pretty, I was trying to figure it out. It seems really complicated about how the search engine is going to know about it. So in my case, I wasn't ever going to make my own custom vocabulary, so I didn't care that much about it, but I just know that they exist. So the question is, how do you use these on a website. They're there, you can find them, but how do you use them to extend your HTML? And that's where structured data comes in. Structured data is information formatted in a universally understandable way. Meaning, like what I said earlier, if you just have a div with some content in it, you can structure that content in such a way that the search engine is going to instantly know what you're talking about. It's not going to have to guess based on the words in there and then other stuff around it. It's just going to be structured so that it knows exactly what you're talking about. And Google currently recognizes these structured data formats: page maps, microformats, RDFA, microdata, meta tags, and page dates. And we're going to focus on these three because these are the most relevant to sort of SEO, or making SEO a little bit better for your site. And we're going to put most focus on microdata because it works really well with schema.org, which we'll talk about later. So microformat's been around for a while, and if you may have seen websites in the past where they'll have classes like vcard or things like that. And so that's the microformats structured data. And it was set up so that you can create this markup using elements that are familiar to web developers, which is classes. So they have a structure of classes, like vcard is basically a business card, so it's information about a person. vEvent is information about an event on a calendar. So you add these classes to your code, and then if the search engine recognizes microformats, it would understand that, hey, this class means there's, information about a person in it. RDFA is Resource Description Framework and Attributes. And this one is was created by the World Wide Web Consortium. And this is sort of their recommended structured data because they're the one that create it, they maintain it, and they update it. And the cool thing about RDFA is that it works with various languages. So you can use it in SVG, you can use it in XML elements, you can use it in XHTML, HTML5. You can add these elements to all those. And the other cool thing is it can reference multiple data vocabularies. So the problem with certain vocabularies are, like that relationship one, it's about relationships. Right? If you have a website that part of it is about relationships, you're only going to use it there. But if you have that and other stuff, you're going to need a separate language to talk about other elements on your site. So using RDFA, you can, on the same web page, you can pull different vocabularies in to describe stuff on your page. Whereas you'll see in the next one, microdata, you can't do that. You can only use one vocabulary at a time. The problem with RDFA is it's really complicated to use because it's based on XML, and it's not like straightforward on how you use it for just like a web developer. There's a lot of, it's like the code to use it is just a little bit more complicated. So what happened was RDFA Lite was created to be, it works only with HTML5, but it's easier to use, it's more straightforward, more simplified in how it works. So microdata, similar to RDFA Lite in the way it's structured, and it only works in HTML5. Like RDFA Lite, it's easy to understand, easy to use relatively, and like I said, the only one drawback for this is that you can only use one vocabulary at a time, except for what we're going to talk about next, and I'll explain that later. So the question is, if you have a website, let's say you sell products, you sell a bunch of different things, and if you're using microdata, you can only use one vocabulary at a time on a page, but you don't want to, or even with RDFA Lite, you don't want to have to go and find all these different vocabularies to use, because it's annoying to have to find them. You can go here, search all these, and you're going to have to go through and search which vocabularies you want to use. So the ideal situation is you have one vocabulary that basically covers everything in your site, so you never need to find another vocabulary to use. Now, Does something like that exist, though? That's where schema.org comes in. So schema.org is an HTML vocabulary that is recognized and maintained by the web's top 4 search engines. So Google, Bing, Yahoo, and Yandex. And Yandex is Russia's top search engine. And really the selling point between this is basically this language or this vocabulary is maintained by these search engines. So it's not like a vendor prefix on a website where a browser is going to create its own prefix for CSS class, and then you have to wait for it to actually be adopted by the HTML spec in order to use it on different browsers. This one is, because all these companies run it, if it's on the schema.org website, you can use it. It's being recognized by these companies. It was originally created for use with microdata, but it can be used with RDFA as well, because it's just a vocabulary. So any of those can use this. And Google also recommends this particular vocabulary for websites. So these are the strong reasons why you can use this one. So let's go to Schema's website. So here's the schema.org website. It's like those other languages where all you need is a unique URL to define it. And here's all the different elements within it. Now I'm going to show you how this works with microdata, but everything you're going to need to know about schema is on this website, because it's going to have a link to every sort of element that you can use with it. Okay, so we're talking about how schema works. We have to define how microdata works. So microdata has 3 main components. It has a scope, which is, we referred to earlier, say you have a div, or some sort of container that has a bunch of content in it. The scope is that main parent container. So that's, the scope is everything contained in here is going to be part of whatever the schema is. The type is where you define what type of schema you are talking about, and that's here. So the type would be schema.org/product. You're going to say, within this scope, we're talking about product. Next is item property. So properties are all of these elements. So all of these are sort of like the words you can use with this type. It has 3 other components as well. So you have nested types, which means you can have, product, and then inside that container you can have a reviews type. So it can just keep getting more and more specific. Basically you're nesting your types. Something called missing for implicit information, which I'll show you in an example. But it's information that is either not viewable to the user or is implied to the user, like a $sign, and I'll explain how that works later. And enumeration is something where it's a list of properties that can only have a limited set of values. And these values are defined by the actual HTML vocabulary. So schema has a certain set of values that something can be, and in this instance it would be products availability. Schema defines you can only have available, not available, discontinued, like short time only, those sort of things. So those are a limited set of values. Schema sets them, and then you can use that. Here's a quick example of how you define a product. So here's just your standard HTML code here. You just have a div that has, we're selling a microwave on this website. Name of the product, you have the image, you have the rating. So this could be, like the total rating for the product based on all the reviews there are. Price, the availability here, description, and here's all the individual reviews. So again, the issue with this is if a search engine comes in here, it's going to see a bunch of words. It's not necessarily going to know that these are all related to a specific product. It just sees a bunch of text, and it has to figure out what it means. So what you do with schema is you define what everything means. So here's the same code, but with schema attached to it. And here's the item when I was talking about the scope. So the main parent container is the scope of this entire product. And so you'd add item scope here. And then you define what type of type of schema it is. So you say item type. In this case, it's product. And then how we said all the properties, like the words. So here's all the properties within here. So you just define, here's the item scope, here's the item type for a product, here's the name of this product, here's an image for this product, and here is where we have sort of the nested types, because this item scope and item type is within the main parent. So in this case, we say aggregate rating, because it's like a combination of all the different ratings. And then the way to know what type of properties you can use is we're in product, so all of these would be defined as item prop is similar to item prop, item condition. That's how you know what you can use within each one.
So you're nesting scopes here.
Yep. And so the nesting, because the reason you want to do that is you could have your main product and it has a limited set of properties, but you can have a scope and a type called, like in this case, aggregate rating, which has its own properties applied to it, which you can't use with just product. You can only use it with this aggregate rating one. But aggregate rating works as a property of product. So you nest it to get more specific about your content that you're writing. And here is an example of implied information. So when a viewer is looking at this website, it sees a $sign, or the viewer sees a $sign and a number. And we're in the US, the viewer's going to look at that and they're going to say, okay, that means $55 because I recognize that symbol. Search engine doesn't necessarily know what this symbol means without some context. It could be Canadian dollars or Australian dollars, or it could be some JavaScript code that's put in there. It doesn't recognize what that means, so it's implied. So what you have to do is where this sort of varies from the standard thing, you have to insert this content attribute. And this particular attribute for this property is based on a limited set of information, which are ISO codes for currency. You can see a list here. So in that content section, because this is listed as price currency, it knows it's going to, whatever this content is going to be referring to an ISO code for currency. So you find the currency you want, stick it in there. Now the web search engine knows, okay, he's talking about US dollars. He's not talking about something else. And so you're defining everything. And then here's another one. This one is an enumeration. So in this case, we have says it's available today. To a user, he knows what that means. He knows, okay, a product's available. Search engine doesn't know what that means. It just says available today. He doesn't have any context of what that means. So schema defines certain types of availability, and there's a limited set. Like I said, they're in stock, out of stock, discontinued. And these are defined by schema. So you would say, whatever this text is, you can ignore it. Search engine, pay attention to this. And what this means is it's referring to this URL, so it means whatever this text says, it just means this item is in stock. And you do it if it's out of stock. I believe it's the URL is just that, out of stock, things like that. Then down here we just have review, so it works the same way. You can have the date published, you can have the actual review rating, you can have the best rating it could be, you have the description and all that stuff. So that's a general way that schema works. So the question is, why? Why do we want to use schema on our websites? Because when we just look at that code, all you know is that you just add a bunch of markup to your website. And it takes a lot more time to write it because it's a lot of stuff you have to put in. It can almost like add a third more code to your website. So there has to be some reason to do it. One of the main reasons is more accurate search results. So like I talked about earlier with the Jaguar. Having this stuff in there makes the search engines more instantly recognize what you're talking about. So it's going to find that web page more quickly than it would if it didn't have schema. And it can also potentially make your results show higher in the general search results because it's going to know what is there. The other good thing about it is with Google specifically, Google uses something called rich snippets. So it'll grab certain elements from your schema code and it'll display it in the search results. So here's an example here. Let me show you the live example of it. So if you're searching for a Merrimax model 86379, which is a rain gutter guard, you just type that in, and you'll see the search results that come in. So Home Depot uses schema, Lowe's doesn't. They're right next to each other, but you can see the difference in what the actual search result looks like. Because here, on the one that uses schema, you see the actual rating, the star rating, you see the rating number, you see the number of reviews, you see the price, and you see its availability. With Lowe's, you don't see any of that. So you can think about it, if, say these were like more local companies that were in big competition with each other, and you were just looking for something to buy in store, you'd see all this stuff here. Without even looking at the actual page, you already find all the relevant information you need. And you would know, hey, this product is in stock in this store. And you don't know with this one. So that's where one of the really big enhancements comes in for this stuff. Now, another example is I have to talk about myself for a second. So I've only lived here for a year in the Lehigh Valley. There's no websites with my name attached to them online that are in the Lehigh Valley. I don't have a blog, but I talk about web design in Lehigh Valley. I have a Twitter account, but I don't post on it. I have a LinkedIn account, I don't really post on it. So I don't have a very big sort of like online footprint for myself for what I do in the Lehigh Valley. But if somebody were typing in front-end developer Lehigh Valley, right, we're on the first page, search results. You scroll down and you see job posting, job posting, job posting, job posting, job posting, job posting, and then my website on the first page. And this is the only one that's talking about a person. This is the only one that's not a job posting. So if somebody is looking for an actual front-end developer, my website's going to be the first thing they see. And the reason for that is it's partly to do with how the page is structured, but it's also the first part of text or content that's on here is this. Lehigh Valley Web Design and Front-End Development. And that has schema.org stuff attached to it. So that's how it finds that, and that's why it shows up like that. So if you think about it in terms of Trifecta's website, for example, one of our big competitors is this company. And I know from looking at their site, they don't have any schema.org or any microdata attached to their site. Especially for here, this would be a really good place to put it, because you could define these are our services and these are our individual services we offer, but they don't. So if our website was redesigned and includes all of this schema.org stuff in it, and if it was set up kind of like the same way theirs was, there's a much better chance that our site would come up first in the search results. Because the schema is going to know that when we list this stuff, we're actually talking about the services we offer, rather than it's just some text. So, yes. Some awesome mouse. So there are a few tools that are very good to use. One is schema.org, and the actual website has an explanation of how to use everything, and it lists like all the actual types of schema that you can use are on there, so you can see all the properties, and it has examples of how to use everything. But one of the more important tools to use is Google's Structured Data Testing tool. So say, let's go back here for a second. Say you're writing some code. You're including all this schema stuff, but you don't know if you're writing it correctly. You want to test to see if what you're writing is correct. So they have this code or this tool where you can fetch a URL. You can just type in a URL and it'll check to see what structured data is listed, or you put your own code in there. And this is what we had written down for the product. And then you validate it, and it shows you everything that it recognizes from that code. So it knows this is a product, it knows this is the name of the product, the image, description, it knows this is the aggregate rating, and so on. And then what's cool is, say if you had something incorrect, like you spelled that wrong, validate it. No, it didn't find that one. Oh, that's because I put it on that one. Okay. On the actual item prop, just spell that wrong. So it sees there's an error here, because it doesn't recognize availability, because you spelled it wrong. Click on that. It shows you what's wrong, and then it shows you where it's wrong. So you know all you have to do is like, okay, you see, oh, I spelled it wrong. That's fine. You revalidate it, and it's correct. So it's a pretty good way of testing your code and figuring out what's wrong. It also has examples of how to do things here if you don't know how to do something, but I think schema.org's website itself is pretty good at that. Because usually at the bottom of most of these pages, it shows different examples of some code you might want to write. It shows you how to do it with schema in microdata format. It shows you RDFA Lite format. And it also has something called JSON LD, which is a way to post all this stuff using JSON. That's it. That is it.
Are there any tools to help you actually inject this markup into your code to automate the process?
I don't know. The only thing I could think would be if there's like some plugins.
Like a WordPress plugin?
Yeah.
That does it?
I haven't seen any WordPress plugins that do this though. But that would be a good thing to actually create.
Or is the product team using this schema?
No. And schema is something where you want to use this on any public-facing page. But you don't need to use it if there's like a login site, none of that, because it's not facing the public, right? But any public-facing page, you can use it, because there's stuff you can have it, products. You can list it as address for your business, for people, like for almost anything you can want to sort of describe on a website. There's something for it, and schema is always being updated too. So if you come back next week, there's probably something else added, which makes it difficult because you have to keep figuring out what there is to add. But I imagine at some point this is going to be sort of the vocabulary that has everything. You won't need to, we won't have a need to have more specific vocabulary. Like that relationships one, I don't know if this has that yet, but in the future perhaps it does because they keep growing it.
Are there any repercussions for lying?
Yes, there are. Well,
who manages that?
It's not necessarily lying, but that's another thing I should show you. Google has a structured data page. This site sort of gives best practices for it, and it has examples such as for product. It says product should be an individual page with a single product. when you use that actual schema code. And what happens is if Google realizes you're using something incorrectly, and it will actually strip that data out of the search results. So it won't use, so say for like a product, if you say you have reviews, but they're not actually reviews, or like something like that, and you have a bunch, it would not show that in the search results. It would just strip that out. And so that, punishes people for doing stuff like that, for trying to trick it. And I don't know how smart it is, but there's just always things like how to enable rich snippets for products, recipes, stuff like that. And then
Google's known for blacklisting people that try to game the system, like link farms and all that stuff. It's really don't exist anymore, right?
So yeah, that's the only thing I know of where it's basically like the search engines are sort of the gatekeepers of what they think is correct.
How much does Google rely on schema? Like, say, schema goes down, and I do the same search twice in a row. How different are the results that come back? Is it just that it doesn't show those, like, that little information about ratings and stuff, or did the entire order of everything change because schema's down? Like, Google depends on that so much. Like, I guess my thought was that Google did a lot of language processing itself and ranked it. But I don't know.
That's a good question. I wonder if they would just...
You're saying that schema.org is down when you try to do a search?
I never thought about that. Interesting.
Probably just return results as if
just like a normal result
it
out.
out.
Yeah. Unless it stores it somewhere.
Yeah, it might have a good
like for your gutter catcher thing. It might just, Lowe's might be on top then.
Yeah.
You go below it.
And the thing is, Lowe's is actually, depending on what you type, Lowe's comes up above Home Depot sometimes and below. So it's not necessarily like where schema is.
It's priority.
Yeah. It's more just like it helps Google recognize what it is. Because like if there's, obviously Lowe's has a bunch of inbound links, things like that. It has other elements that it's using for better search engine optimization, so that plays a big part too. The schema is just a part of it.
So the product one, you said you couldn't have a page of products, like 10 products, and use the product code on each one?
Nope. There's stuff called, there's a search results page you can use. There's something called like a category list page, I think. So you can have a category of products. But Google, there's like a specific page, and I have to find it, where it says, Google believes that when you use product, it should only be on for individual
Find
product.
that specific product. Yeah. Is there a schema for I'm sure there is for related products?
Yes.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Because there's a bunch of things that schema has. So let's go. Because you have descriptions and all that stuff. You have offers, is where like the price comes into play there. You say the manufacturer, you say the product logo, you say the condition of the item is related to. So that would be, I think, related products. There's all sorts of stuff here. Categories involved in, any awards for the product. Gets pretty deep on what you can show.
Well, now, when you do a Google search and it shows the different pages, like menu, locations, as sublinks underneath the same link, is that schema too?
I think that's just Google doing it, but you can define those things as well.
Is that like in the sitemap?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, you can set, there's a schema for a website element, and you can define where, like, here's your navigation, these are breadcrumbs, things like that. You can, like, it's kind of weird how it does it, because you can define, you can say, what I see a lot too is the main, like, the body element is like, defines it as a web page type.
And that's a certain scope?
Yeah, the entire scope of body is a web page. But it's weird because it's like, well, of course it's a web page, right? So why do you even need to define that? But there's things with properties within web page you can use. Like,
Okay.
I think it's the navigation, that stuff. So yeah, breadcrumbs. You show last time it was reviewed, primary image of page. And all this stuff seems, I don't know, some of it seems super specific. I don't know if you ever use it, but it's there for whatever reason.
That would be the one.
The author of the page. And one of the good things, or the cool things about it, there's a whole bunch of job posting schema elements. So you could define some of the job posting. You could define the salary that's offered, the requirements of the job, the responsibilities, define bonuses, that sort of stuff in there, which would be really hard to do in a content management system because usually people just paste a bunch of stuff, right? And you have to manually type it in there. But if you want to have a really good job posting, you could use all that stuff. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, there's a whole.
So you've used this on like sites that you've designed or developed before?
Yeah.
Like restaurant site?
I've done it on a restaurant site.
Obviously it works for your own personal site.
Yeah. Done it for non-profit site. Did it on.
And do you then use webmaster tools to submit it for crawling, or you just let the engines crawl it automatically?
Let it go. It would be better if I used webmaster tools. But yeah, so here's like the getting started. Shows you, explains everything for you. And then you can dive in here.
It's going to be very helpful for like the new trifecta site to start using.
Yeah. So you see the list: health and medical types, organizations.
Are agencies using this, do you know? I just they are.
It's kind of like hit and miss. I've seen it on some, not on others. Like that. I guess that Liquid Plate isn't really an agency, but I don't know if Huge is.
Huge is an agency. Or you don't know if they're using
Yeah.
it? Okay. Gotcha.
So this shows them not. This is all like meta stuff, yeah. So they don't.
How about Google.com?
So all it defines this is a web page, and here's an image. So it's the main image of the web page. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see who uses it, who doesn't. Interesting thing about schema, the website is, so when this first came out, it only used microdata. Like these examples down here, it only showed how to do it in microdata. Oh, this is not even available. There's microdata, but then they added these two. You can see like the similarities between these. Like item scope, item type. So the type is the vocab, just it references schema. Type of is the actual type and all that stuff. But on Schema's actual website, they use RDFA Lite to define everything.
Which is the easier one, right? Is that what you're saying?
It's not. I think that and microdata, they're basically the same. They screw up their own website. Might be something else going on. But they're basically easy. Like they're so similar that there's no reason why you would use one or the other. The only positive that RDFA Lite has is that you can use multiple vocabularies within the same scope.
Didn't you say schema lets you do that too?
Schema, no, because schema is the vocabulary.
Okay.
So it'd be like, with RDFA Lite, you could say, here's, everything in here is a schema. You could define item type schema. You can also define item type, like, you can go to, you would reference, like, this page here, vocab.org/ You could have both of those in there, whereas microdata, it wouldn't let you do that. You can only have one. But then the point, then I guess, like, why you use schema is to hopefully only ever need one vocabulary, because it has so much.
And then within schema, you can either use micro format or the JSON thing. Or
Yeah.
You use micro formats. Is the one you prefer?
Microdata.
Microdata.
Because microformat is interesting. That's the one that has the classes. Microformat only uses microformat language.
Like the card that was
Yeah. Because it's using classes and not sort of like attributes,
Yeah.
it doesn't reference any language or any vocabulary, it just references itself. So you can only use one for them. That's why I wouldn't use that, because in Europe too.
So you prefer then you use microdata then? Or
Yeah, because microdata is one that I learned it on, but actually when I was researching this, I almost think I'd rather use RDFA Lite, because it's so similar, it's going to be really easy to learn, and just the fact, if there was a case where I needed to use a second vocabulary, I could. So that, I would say they're almost interchangeable.
they show RDFA Lite snippets.
Yep. So here it is. It's listed as RDFA, but it's actually RDFA Lite. Because the RDFA doesn't look like this. It's all got
It's
like,
more complicated.
yeah. Yep.
Cool.
All right. Any other questions?
Anyone on the phone have questions?